Hey guys, we want to thank Cap City Tees for sponsoring today's episode. That's right, Cap City Tees, the #1 printing company in Sacramento. Well, at least in our hearts. Cap City Tees is an amazing company putting out amazing quality at, most importantly, amazing prices. They are in line with any major retailer out there. Now, if you're in need of getting a shirt screen printed or embroidered, whether that's your local soccer team or basketball team or volleyball team or all the way up to corporate clothing, Cap City Tees is the place to go. So if you're in need or if you're in want, reach out to Cap City Tees at capcitytees.com or capcitytees@gmail.com. That's capcitytees@gmail.com. Welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. It is a good day when we can jump on the podcast. We have Nora on the line today. Nora, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. How are you today?
It is a good day. I mean, I really cannot complain. It's starting to get hot here in Sacramento, and that's great. We're really excited about that because we're kind of back and forth with, should we open our pool? Should we not open our pool? And then it starts raining and then it's almost 100 degrees. So we're hoping, I mean, it's a weird thing in California, right? To be like, we're hoping that there's no more rain, but then we're always like, well, we need more rain.
But we need the rain.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting, but this isn't about me and this isn't about what we're doing with our pool, right? This is about you. So we wanted to talk a little bit about your real estate journey. I think you're doing something a little bit unique. I know you're doing something around barbecue, and I want to know what's going on with that. But I do want to kind of start with, how did you get into real estate? What did that look like for you? And we can kind of jump off there.
For sure. So my journey started probably about 2015. I came down from Seattle to be a massage therapist at Harbin, which is a local hot springs. However, it burned down in 2015, the day I applied. So I ended up doing some volunteer work and actually ended up on a cannabis farm, basically paying the bills, managing the employees, managing the animals, kind of really getting into someone else's property and being responsible for it. I moved there to apartment management for 3 years. And in 2020, I got my license to sell real estate after working with my broker as their receptionist for about 6 months. So I had a pretty good head start as to where a lot of agents kind of dive in right after they get their license. I'd already been doing all the paperwork and pretty much as an assistant for my broker. So that was quite a leg up, I would say. And in 2020, of course, we all know what happened. We were deemed essential workers. We just had to fill out a lot of paperwork and releases with any buyers going into houses. So nobody could sue for catching the bid, all kinds of fun stuff through that period. But sales were phenomenal. After about a couple months of hesitation, some sellers got really nervous and pulled out. A lot of sellers decided the only way to get renters out of their house who were not paying was to sell it. And so we got a lot of evictions that we had to go through, a lot of different experiences in that area, both in sales and property management. After about 2 or 3 years of doing that, I've sold about 40 houses in Lake County, which is about 2 hours north of San Francisco, just a little bit north of Napa, Calistoga area. Probably one of the most affordable counties left in California. We were going through inventory so crazy. And just like we saw in the Bay Area, we were getting high cash bids over listing prices. Pretty insane down here because you're getting a 3-bedroom house for $250. You've got multiple families bidding on it, first time buyers, and then you have someone coming with cash 50 grand over, and then they flip it the next year for $350. So that was high competition. We had a lot of disappointed first time buyers that were putting in bid after bid after bid and just getting outbid by cash. So once that settled down this last 6 months, it's definitely calmed down. I was kind of recruited into managing a site that is being set up as the Loch Lomond Resort and RV Park. And so that's 2 different fractional investments. I actually sold the owner of the RV park after he purchased what is currently a market deli with a restaurant, an Olympic pool, a couple of office spaces and a coffee shop, and about 2 acres of space for like concerts. As you can see back here, we've got some space. We're building out benches. So kind of a lot of activity. And so when I saw he bought that and I got the listing for the RV park, take over any other county, code enforcement type stuff. So they worked that out. He's got the 4 cabins located there, fully renovated, a 4-bedroom manufactured. We're already on VRBO. So we've already got a tenant that will be in one of the cabins for a couple weeks. We've definitely invited the locals to come out and tour our location. And I'm opening a real estate office for the owner's brokerage. His wife owns a brokerage the last couple of years, so I've been invited to manage their new office, their second branch. They originate in Folsom, and this will be their first branch in Lake County.
So you're busy. I
Big
mean, it
press.
sounds you got your hands full in the real estate market. It's interesting because we put out, I don't know, this is, we're on the second season. We started in October of last year. We had quite a big guest on. I've been on myself, and we haven't really talked about what it was like to do real estate during COVID, which is surprising, right? Because I think
Yeah.
maybe it has to do with the fact that I restarted rewatching a show, The Good Doctor,
Hmm.
and where I left off of that show, it picked back up right at COVID. So the entire episode's about being a doctor in COVID, right?
Right.
And it really kind of like brought me back. And it kind of made me think about how we've kind of pushed it out of our mind a little bit because
Yep.
everything was about COVID. And we're like, okay, can we stop talking
It's
about it?
over it.
Can it stop being everywhere? But we haven't really talked about it on the real estate side. And you're right, it was a super weird time, right?
Yeah.
Um, on the real estate side, I remember distinctly people being other realtors being very precautious about the homes, and they'd be like, you need to put on shoe booties, you need to
Hmm.
put on gloves, you need to be wearing a mask,
Yep.
you need
Sanitize
to,
everything.
yeah, exactly, you need to sanitize. It
Yeah.
was very odd. And to have that conversation with, and it really depends on where you're at too, right? Because in Sacramento, even in Sacramento, um kind of once you get into Roseville and past that, way people treated COVID was a lot different than if you were closer to the epicenter of
Right.
Sacramento. And it was kind of like you saw people that were very serious about it, and then other people that were like, no, I'm not going to wear a mask or whatever it is. And so I was doing quite a business in the Central Valley near Modesto at the time,
Right.
and it was very much like that as well, right? So and this was sort of early on as well, so people would show up without masks, and they wouldn't really like, and I'd be like, look, I get it, but like, you had to sign a COVID waiver.
Yep.
There's nothing I can do about these rules. Like, if you want to buy a house, you're gonna have to follow the rules, right? So I assume that was very similar experience for you, right? But
Right.
even, I don't know, maybe in Lake County it was different.
It was a bit more lax. We had quite a bit more pushback to the masks in public arena. Where it came to like my buyers, I mean, like I said, there were a lot of cash bids. So some people never even entered the houses they bought. Like a lot of corporations came in, but like I had first time buyers that were coming in with FHA loans and, those type of programs. So we were going in 5, 6 houses. So, you're
Hmm.
putting on masks and booties for the 5th, 6th time. You've already been turned down for multiple bids. It was exhausting. And
Hmm.
a lot of buyers just kind of rolled with it. They knew that they are either in a position to where they had to buy a house. It was the best, I mean, the best interest rates we have ever seen ever and may not see for a long time. And so it's like there was the push to take advantage of that. And then the inventory was just being snatched up. So it was a really emotional roller coaster for a lot of my buyers. But for my sellers, getting multiple bids in, having to present 5, 6 bids at a time that are 50, 60,000 over, that was a very exciting time. So, and for those agents who could get sellers, and of course you were dealing with other agents that were more lax than you, and sellers that were paranoid that the buyers, could possibly catch something in their house, and whether the house was vacant or not, like there was a lot of precaution to take and plan out a buyer's day of showings, and all the paperwork you had to send to each agent. So it was an intense time. It's nice to kind of relax now to where you can just show up with your buyer and walk through a house and leave.
Right, exactly. Well, I bought a home during that time as well. So my wife and I at the time, we were living in Midtown, Sacramento, and we loved living in Midtown. I mean, that, kind of young, vibrant experience out there. And then COVID happened, and the shutdown happened, and we were stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment. And it just got kind of like, it got kind of crazy, which I'm sure it did in all kind of like metropolitan areas. People are really worried, and even going to like the grocery store was so weird. Like just
Yeah.
being like, there's only so much space for you to spread out in these places. And so I was like, well, maybe we should buy, right? And so we were trying to time the market as well, and we kind of knew where things were going to be going. There's not a lot of times that as a realtor, you can like super predict what's going to go on in the market. But we started to see the shift pretty quickly, and we're like, we don't know how low they're going to go, but we know that the rates are going to go down. And so, um, yeah, we ended up buying, and it was, even as a realtor who I did my own deal, it was really like, it was a stressful time, right? And I was managing the entire thing myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, and trying to compete against people who, were doing cash offers or were going $50,000 over. And they're being, I really don't think, besides the house that we got, and the only reason we got it, it was because it fell out of escrow 3 times.
Oh, no kidding.
And the family, it was a realtor's family member who needed to get it off. And
Right.
so it just kind of was like serendipitous. And I was like, look, I'm a realtor and I'll get this done. And I got it done in 14 days.
Ooh,
We
nice.
closed. So, but every other house was a minimum of 20 offers on these properties. And so it was a crazy time, but it was funny. I was just looking over my tax stuff, just kind of re-prepping it. And that was a weird time of like buying stuff, right? You get like expensing like gloves and masks and stuff
Right.
like that. It's like, I don't know if you can really do that anymore, but at the time I was like, I'm pretty sure the IRS is going to be all right with these purchases.
You think?
So yeah, so it was a
For sure.
super interesting time. But so you're up there, you're doing real estate, and you're doing a lot of transactions. I mean, 40, you said, in your first 2 years?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yes.
And that's very abnormal, right? I mean, if you guys don't know, the average transaction rate for realtors in general, not even just brand new realtors, is 4 to 6 deals a year.
Yep.
So you were already averaging over. What got you there? What was, I mean, maybe it was a timing thing, but I mean, you must have been very capable as well.
It's definitely a timing thing. I mean, I got my real estate license over the age of 40. I've been a sales manager for Best Buy multiple years. I worked, multiple things. My management for property management was for the government department. So lots of paperwork. So all that came pretty naturally. And I think that's what a lot of agents struggle with in the first part. I also was doing marketing for my brokerage. So it was pretty simple to kind of get used to marketing myself, which has
Mhm.
never been really easy. But once I realized I was going to be doing real estate, I needed to prove some credibility, some capability. So I think having kind of a more mature approach as to where I definitely wish I had started at 18, 19. But I probably would have scrambled and not done as well as quickly.
Mhm.
Um, I did a lot of transactions with my broker, with other agents. So a lot of cooperation that was put in. And we just had so many of the Bay Area coming out. Like I was constantly getting buyers picking
Mhm.
up 1, 2 properties. I had one gentleman I did 4 transactions with. I'm currently in kind of a group of agents that's selling the castle that's up here, about 65,000 square foot castle that overlooks the
Cool.
lake. Right. So I just get into these really crazy transactions with really awesome individuals. A lot of them are being turned into Airbnbs. A couple that I sold are now beautiful little cabin Airbnbs up here that are booked constantly.
Mhm.
So the vacation feel becoming permanent to the Bay Area after being locked in. And now that we have more capability for internet and everybody's figured out they can work from home, or at least most
Mhm.
of those who can, we've got a huge influx of higher income individuals coming out here and picking up houses that they can fix up, that they can have acreage on, that's, costing less than their 3-bedroom apartment, which was 2,700 a month. They're paying way less. So it's interesting to see the volume go in. Now, at this point, because of the position I took, I kind of took a break from sales so much and been managing in site and construction and all that. So I actually had 1 sale initially in January and I have 2 in escrow right now. So
Mhm.
definitely a huge slowdown. I can't say I gotten a whole lot of buyer interest in the last few months. The interest rates have obviously gone up with Yeah, that kind of slowed everything down. Inventory got real low, sellers got real nervous, things sat on the market for too long. I had a couple that I couldn't get off that are now Airbnb theirs through the season and may
Mm.
reconsider selling. So a bigger shift towards movement. And right now I'm working with the fractional investment with Bellwood Investments, who's doing the Loch Lomond Resort that I'm working for here. And that's basically focusing on helping buyers flip their own properties and kind of going in with them on Airbnbs and second
Mm.
home vacation rentals, that they can come out for a couple weeks throughout the year and rent the rest of the time and cover their mortgage. So we're trying to be creative through this, because buying and selling isn't the end all of real estate, as we know.
Right. Yeah. So if you guys aren't familiar with Lake County, there's a beautiful lake out there. And it so happens to be that my roommate in college, my freshman and sophomore roommate, was from Lake County. So I
Hmm.
had an opportunity to go up there a couple times. It was very beautiful, and I've driven through there as well to go up to the beach up north, and so very beautiful area. And I think a lot of people have kind of realized, like you said, that if they don't have to go into work, where can they be? We have a friend who moved to San Diego,
Mm,
and after moving was like, hey, I live in San Diego now. Love to keep working for you guys, but if you don't want me to work for you, I totally understand. And they
mm,
what else? They were just like, well, I guess it's working, so just keep working until it doesn't work, right? And
right.
and so I totally understand, where people are coming from. Plus, depending on where they were coming from, but I mean, the Bay Area money went everywhere, up here in Northern California.
Oh yeah.
And even people who maybe wanted to still live in the Bay Area, but you're right, they wanted the second place. It made a lot of sense to double down on an investment at that time. And so, it was such an interesting time, and to watch the market grow like that. And then now it is where it is, where you're kind of saying it's slowed, and I do some coaching and some guidance with our realtors and my realtor partners. And we kind of go back and forth. And I said, look, this where the market is where it is right now, unless you're highly honed in and extremely capable, it's going to be very difficult to navigate this market. Don't feel super upset about that. The best thing you can do right now is double, triple down on your marketing,
Mhm.
build a community now, because realtors are leaving, loan officers are leaving. And when the market shifts back in a favorable way for realtors, you're going to be what's in front of them, right?
Right.
That's kind of where the market is right now. I just did a market update the other day, so people who I guess listen to me frequently will know that. But um, so you've transitioned mostly. Is it considered property management, or what is it considered, kind of real estate wise for you?
Yeah, so I'm called the site manager because we have a property manager who handles the bills.
Mm.
I'm basically here for construction supervising. I've hired and disciplined employees to make sure that our deli and coffee shop are running. I've written
Mm.
up leases for the office space. So I'm kind of the feet on the ground, but we also have a construction manager who's ordered all our kitchen equipment and just a couple of other people out of Folsom. So I'm kind of the Lake County local that sits and jabs all day with the locals coming through asking questions and making sure to put a face on it.
Doesn't sound
And
like a bad time.
it's really not. And
Mm.
the personality that I have, this works really well. I think my last broker really had his sights on me being like an excellent, number one sales agent.
Mm.
And I probably could if that's where my focus was. But I really do have a communal mind of trying to, bring a project to fruition and hopefully put that on my resume for investors of my own.
Mm.
And I'd like to do something more like sustainable, hemp, bamboo, that type of stuff. So this is kind of a good stepping stone, I think.
Yeah, that would be that. I mean, that would be really cool. My wife and I love to watch the um the TV shows where they build crazy and elaborate homes around the world. And we watched one of them that was about bamboo. And it was amazing what they could build with it. And the other thing is how quickly that they can produce
Right.
those supplies, right? They grow very quickly, and they're just as strong. And we were just having a conversation with our friends over the weekend about how even buying new construction now doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a great home. They put them together so quickly. They're not always built the best way. And my kind of point was lumber, that homes that were built a long time ago, they were built on much older wood and they're a
Mm-hmm.
little bit stronger. They're more, they last longer. And the
Yep.
wood now is so young that
Yeah.
it just is not as good. So I think that's a really cool idea. I would love to learn more about that at some point. So I was thinking about, you said earlier, you kind of got into real estate a little bit later in life. And I've gone back and forth a couple of times because you said, oh, it would have been nice to get into it when I was 18. But I almost think that getting into real estate as like a second career is almost the way to go, because it is really, I mean, not that it's any easier for anybody, but it helps to have established community. If you don't have established community, you have to be very focused and forward and purposeful on building community around yourself, because that's where your business is going to come from, right? We talk about, my background is in marketing as well, and we talk about the ROI on marketing. It's very little, right? And if you get your marketing as an individual to a point where it's very successful, typically you're probably like at a point where you're kind of like, well, should I be an influencer or should I do real estate, right? Like, which way should I
Right.
go with this? And so when you're in your 40s, right, you've lived a life, like you have friends, you have community, you've been in sports and church and whatever else you've been in life, right? And so those sort of things, I mean, you come in and now you're like, okay, hey everybody, this is what I'm doing now. And hopefully, you've built good relationships. And that's a little tougher when you're younger, but also on the other side, when you're younger, you have more energy, you're a little more agile, things like that. So it kind of has a trade-off. Do you have a strong kind of idea on this?
Yeah, and actually, because I did move to this county in 2015, kind of in the chaos of the big fires that were going on, my community was like only 2, 3 years old, but a
Mm,
lot of my leads actually did come off Facebook. Local people who knew I was in real estate, I was just publicizing, inviting people to my public page, and they would hit me up and be like, "Hey, my daughter wants to buy a house. Hey, we've qualified for a loan. I've got a loan officer that I refer people to." I started a local group on the Facebook that just with renters, just to make sure they know what programs are available and what the benefits of buying. So just kind of touching base with that definitely helped. And my kids are in school with the other kids around here, and it's just kind of a necessary thing to involve your community. But my most recent escrow for a $600,000 house, an older one, 1950s house that's been fully renovated, was actually from TikTok. I do a couple of real simple videos on TikTok talking about the resort, talking about my new office, and someone hit me up on there and emailed me off of my email to make sure that I got the message that they wanted to come out and see a certain house. And we saw it. We got an offer on it that Monday, and we're now in escrow for it. So it can just putting yourself out there, being personable, being able to talk to your profession and your interests really makes it easy for people to go, hey, that's the person I want to help me with the most important decision of my life.
yeah, I know it's so scary buying. Really, I mean, I'm super like money adverse, right? Like it's taken me a very long time to get to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable with making risks when it comes to my money. And especially with the way the market's changing now, there's a lot. I'm really curious on what's going to happen with the Fed Now program this summer and what that transition is going to look like over the next 10 years. And I follow. My wife is from England. We have family in Canada, and it just so happens to be that Canada, the UK, and China are all having extremely bad real estate problems on with America, right? And they're all
Hmm.
sort of for different reasons, which is really interesting, right? So when we I look at all of that stuff, and then I look at what we're doing here in America, and then I look at the value of the dollar. And I'm very interested on this Fed Now program over the summer and how that's going to affect things. But we're looking at what's happening within real estate, and we're looking, okay, well, where are we going to put our money? Because that's where we feel the most comfortable putting our money.
Yeah.
And It's just, it's scary to buy a house. It's scary to buy really anything that's a large purchase, a car, to take out student loans, a business loan, anything like that. But I think particularly a house because you're really not involved with a lot of what's happening. Like if you go to a car dealership, you're there in person, right? But we do a lot of the work on the back end for you so you don't have to. And
Right.
I think that can be really daunting for people to feel like they don't have a lot of control. And we want to give you as much control as you want, but also we want to get the deal closed for you on time, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that can be pretty difficult. But you said like your kids are in the community, you're in the community. And jokingly, I tell my wife, like, we need to have kids because that's really like being able to like you do school stuff. Like, and I love being involved in the community as it is. So for me, it would be a natural transition to like do
Right.
stuff at the school. But when my broker, that's where they have a family is very tied into their school and they get a lot of kind of work out of the school because of that. And so you just have to find your communities, I think, and you have to work those the best you can and be genuine. It sounds like to me that's what you're doing, right? I mean, and you have the experience. So as far as it goes with your kind of background in sales and things like that, and I think this is an interesting way to kind of pivot on this because we do talk quite frequently about what makes a good realtor, right? What skill sets do you have to learn? Because a lot of times people take their exam and then they think I'm gonna be a killer realtor. I did really well on my exam, right? Or I'm gonna be a very bad realtor because I can't pass my exam. Took me a couple times, and that's
Right.
not really the case. There's a lot of different skill sets that go in outside of the transactional learning how to do contracts and things like that. So, how has your past in sales helped you kind of with this profession?
Well, I mean, I started at 20 years old working for Best Buy in the home theater department, which is very uncommon for someone like me, and moved up quickly because I started out as lifeguarding when I was 16 and I took over the pool and basically
Hey,
was
me too.
hiring and teaching CPR. So it was a natural transition into sales to where I was still running a team that was out
Mm.
sharking people. Making sure that they got, and we were selling plasma screens for the first time at that time. So I spent the first 3 years of my 20s intensely being trained by corporate for sales. And that really helped me to build confidence in learning what sales is about. It's about asking the right questions to find out what the best product is for the individual. And I don't think my parents ever got that. They never really got how I got into sales. And it's really about relationships and building up and understanding what they're looking for. Because when you get that for them, there's a great relationship build. They walk away happy. You get less buyer's remorse. And then they tell people about you, of course, and
Mhm.
it becomes that cycle. So just that in my early 20s, dealing with my kids and just having this constant indecision and emotional eruptions. You deal a lot with that when you're dealing with couples, with individuals who have children. So a lot of temperament went into dealing with people in the heightened emotional stage of either having to sell their house or having to even I've helped a lot of people who were renting have to move. I've had them get into houses they buy like instantly type things. So there's a lot of high emotions. There's a lot of testing of the relationships to where both people are kind of trying to get different information out of you. And so there's a kind of a psychology aspect to that.
Mhm.
Being able to get the information that you need from people gently or at least efficiently it takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of understanding human nature, maybe even takes you coming back and not being so pushy because there is timelines to get to, but there's also temperament and attitude to kind of step around to make sure they don't blow up and just like walk away from the whole thing. So
Right.
it's a delicate tap dance, and yet I find it extremely fulfilling because when you hand over those keys and it's done, they can start moving in. It's just such a visceral relief. It's a super like boost. They're excited, you're excited. You hope you don't hear anything about it for the next year. You hope everything went smooth. You check in with them. I actually sold the first house I sold a year later again. My buyers came back and they actually weren't my buyers. I sold the house and they came back to tell me that they wanted me to sell their house that they had bought because they weren't happy with the communication that their agent had, and they were happy with mine. So even getting other, agents, clients, because they saw you, they saw how you acted in their transaction, and they wanted that for themselves.
Right.
So, I can't feel bad because they're doing what's best for themselves, and I'm taking care of people that come to me as best I can.
Hey, you were at Best Buy during like the golden era of Best Buy, right? I mean, I had a lot of buddies from college who worked at Best Buy while they were in college. And I mean, that was
Yeah, I
like the
quit
place
college
to
because
go.
Best Buy was working me so hard. So I ended up not getting my degree, thinking I was going to get my own store by 30 and retire by 35. I actually opened the store in Bellevue, Washington. I came from Marin City to be the supervisor of the home theater store of a brand new kind of richy area store, and did about 8 or 9 months before I was pushed out by the older managers who weren't too keen on a 20-year-old getting visits from the regional sales manager trying to pull her off the floor and teach her how to be a regional sales manager. So it was quite a competition. A lot of it was learning my psychological boundaries, and I think that was probably the most valuable, besides what questions to ask and what products and how to learn your products. It really was, what are your limits? When can you walk away from something, and when do you need to push through and show someone that you have fortitude and let them lean on you?
It's so weird being in any sort of corporate space, right? With the egos that are involved. And especially being like a high achiever young is really tough. Because every manager says that's what they want until you're in line to take their job.
Right.
That's an experience that I can relate to. And there's been a few instances in my life where people have thought essentially that I was cheating because of how successful I am. And that was an occurrence that happened at my last job that I was at, where I worked for the Boy Scouts of America, and part of our metric system is recruiting new kids to join the Boy Scouts. And the metrics were a little kind of messed up because of some odd things that happened with the LDS leaving Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I was in the top 10 employees in the country for recruitment. And I did so well that they audited all my files because they thought I was cheating. They were like, there's something has to be going wrong here, but it wasn't. It was just that I knew how to execute on a plan, right? So I totally get where you're coming from on. It's a real bummer to hear,
Yeah.
hear that, but
Set
it
that
is
up. I was actually questioned as to whether or not I was having relations with my boss because of how well I was doing. So
crazy. It's
you
just,
can see there's
yeah.
the little extra spice when you're of my persuasion as to the
Mhm.
accusations that can go around when you're just working your freaking butt off.
Yeah, well, not that can ever relate to what it is to be a woman, but my wife and I were just watching some TV show, and I had to pause it, and I was like, you know what? Like, essentially, we were talking. I told her that I felt like it was very odd that like women, we don't talk about how powerful women have been in the past, and because I remember learning in college or not in high school that there were these women warriors who were very good archers, and they would even cut off one of their breasts so that they had better
Right?
accuracy. And I remember like just all these instances of like where women, we were watching the documentary on Cleopatra. That's what we're
Okay.
watching.
Yeah.
Very, very good, very interesting. And so I was like, it's so odd that we're at this place. And then I said, you know what I think it is? I think that at some point in society breaks down in these communities, and it comes back to like strength sort of thing, and then men are just almost always stronger than women, and then once they get a little bit of power, they create a bunch of rules so then women can't be powerful anymore, and then it takes forever for women to gain their power back. But you see that like time and time again where like women are really powerful. And then I'm looking and I'm like, what happened? Like, I don't know enough historically, but it's a very odd thing. But I do understand like my wife's friends and I were all very close. We all met together at the same gym. And I knew them before my wife knew them. So they're my friends as well. And they're all extremely competent. They're all extremely like very strong women in general. And it's just kind of baffles me that there's that it happens. I could probably ramble on for this a while, because in grad school I did my thesis on women in CrossFit,
Okay.
and it's a study essentially about their perceived self esteem, and if women who do CrossFit have higher levels of self esteem.
Huh.
So, but the kind of how you're to your point, you have these additional things that happen in your life when you're a woman and you're doing really successful. And I've kind of heard this a little bit in real estate. I haven't gone too in depth with any women about it, but I get a lot of that they get DM'd and like men are hitting on them to try, like, it's not about real estate. That's kind of how they like lean into it. And that's just not anything that happens to me. I've never had one single woman be like, yo, what's up? Like, you want to hang
Right.
out? So that's a very interesting. I mean, I don't know if that's something you've experienced, but um,
Yeah, I
it's
actually
interesting.
had one go on for a couple days before I realized that there was really nothing, serious, to where they would start sending me pictures of their breakfasts. And I was like, oh, this isn't, he was out
No.
in Sacramento. He's saying looking to invest $1 million,
Hmm.
sent me the address of the house he's selling, like all of this. And then it came down to much more personal information. So there's definitely a disappointing filter that you
Right.
have to use with, because you want to get those mysterious. I mean, how else am I going to find buyers? Not everybody I know is buying right now, so it's
Hmm.
coming from strangers, it's coming from people who can relate to me on the internet, it's coming from people who've bought from me, and those people are all kinds of people. And
Yeah.
so just definitely knowing your boundaries, setting your hours, making sure that you know the parameters of how to qualify someone for purchasing or selling, and definitely be safe. And in this industry, I even did a little TikTok where I had all my keys in between my fingers, and the
Mm.
caption was, when you realize that you show empty houses to strangers for a living, use protection, whatever protection you're comfortable with, be it bear mace to an extra little billy club to, your concealed carry, whatever
Mm.
you feel comfortable with. Because definitely, as a woman out in this industry, and especially during COVID, it seemed like there was just kind of even shadier things going on, because you didn't
Sure.
want to meet at the office. Usually you'd meet someone at the office and then go out in your car. You were just meeting people at places. So
Hmm.
there was real extra added caution that we were literally having meetings about making sure that everybody was careful, not just about the disease, but also about people who just seem to come out of the woodwork and take advantage of people who are vulnerable. And that's, I've fortunately not had any type of incident other than the DMs and kind of the misleading, wanting to get into real estate and turning out to being kind of sleazy. Fortunately, we've had a couple people that have come into houses that have had like people in them who are
Mm.
not supposed to be in them. That rattled their cage for sure, but nothing too violent out here in Lake County. We've got quite a spectrum of individuals and constitution. So any woman that gets into a business where you're basically, your relationship with the buyer starts almost right at the door of the house they want to look at. It's very difficult. If you want to get out there and go, you want to meet every expectation of your buyer, but you do need to have boundaries, and you do need to be able to recognize when you're in danger or your
Mm.
time is being wasted.
Yeah, when I got my license for real estate very kind of early, when I was just learning how to use Supra and how to use like open locks and when you're brand new, that's kind of thing. Like, I want to go to these houses and check it out, so I don't look like an idiot when I go show these properties to people. I remember an article coming out, and my wife, my girlfriend at the time, had sent it to me about a realtor woman somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but she got murdered at a property she was showing. And I just thought, wow, like, that is extremely intense. And for me, I'm a big guy, I've always been a big guy since I was in high school. And so I often forget that, like, people can be threatening to you, because I'm almost always like one of the bigger people in the room.
Right.
But I know for sure, like, if my wife was doing real estate, I'd feel really uncomfortable with, as much as I love her and I think she would be capable, I'd be really uncomfortable with her going to show properties where, if it was anywhere near dusk, you know, I would be like, why don't we do it at like 12 in the afternoon, and Let's
Yep.
make sure you go with somebody. So that's such a scary thing. And we don't talk about that a lot, for women that are going to come into the industry. But I think it is something to kind of like that safety is really important. And I have my wife carry stuff all the time. Like, I don't care if you're walking the dog, going to the grocery store. Like, it's better to have it and not need it than you need it and not have it. Right.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, scary, scary time. Well, it's always, I've had this realization a couple of times too. It's scary to be a woman, you know, and that's not like obviously as a first person, I can't experience that, but I think about like just standing, you forget your size a lot of the time, especially like in COVID, we haven't been around anybody. And then like
Right.
most of the time when we're in the house, like I'm sitting, I'm not like standing over my wife, but then we'll go out and we'll be with our friends. And for the most part, the women that I'm around are pretty like they're shorter, they're not as large a statue as me. And then I stand
Mhm.
by them and I go, oh, you guys are pretty small. Like you're like you as a general female group, you're all pretty small. And so it's
Forget how intimidating you
yeah,
can be.
I will say that if there was an option to choose male or female, I would likely renew male because it seems a lot easier than being a female.
Well,
Much
I'll give
easier.
you because I do enjoy being a female. I have
Mm,
had 3 children, and the amazing, like, that's kind of what makes it
mm,
all worth it, is being able to bring up like whole new lives. There's also just kind of a different approach to how people approach you. I think I personally had a very traumatic incident happen in my teens, so I took a lot of self-defense and got into
mm,
kickboxing, like competitive kickboxing, early in my 20s. So I carry a confidence of the fact that I could put a man to sleep in 11 seconds. Like, it's trained, it's in me, it's muscle memory. And I
mm,
think probably helped how I just carry myself
yeah.
through crowds, through areas. I'm also a little bit taller. But I think there's there's always been a sense of needing to protect women, so they've never had to protect themselves, and we are coming out of that to
Mm,
where we are gaining our personal independence of protection, really realizing that we need to be responsible as much as, men need to be responsible for themselves and
mm,
keep each other accountable. It's good that women are coming into that responsibility, as well. And I think, like you said earlier, we've seen such powerful stories of women that we're about to see probably one of the most powerful. There's been so many structures from, religious to economic, that have kind of kept women uneducated. And now, I think Black women are the most educated demographic on the planet. And that's an amazing accomplishment. So I think the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see a huge change in leadership, a huge change in everything, we've ever known. And I'm pretty
mm,
excited to be living in this time because we get to see it all real time. Where
right.
with these devices we've got in our hands, we're the most informed generations on the planet. So it's awesome. I like being a woman. I think it might, if I had chosen, I probably chose this, and it's probably my first time being one. I'm a little awkward as a woman. But I can definitely, we're in a time of high vulnerability, but I think it's also because it's high visibility.
Mm,
Women have been very much been subjected to violence and oppression for quite a few, like you said, a century or two. And now we're coming out. I think we're going to see a lot of awesome things. Where
sure.
economics come in, I think we're going to see a lot of pretty devastating situations and a lot of pivoting in professions and how we deal with things, in real estate. But socially, I'm excited.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily about real estate, but one of my friends just sent me an article about from the New York Times is talking about the divide in the wealth gap and
Hmm.
how that gap is going to continue and grow much larger, over the next 50 years, and how how the middle class is going to be gone. And this is one of the things that I preached, not to scare people necessarily, but to really educate, especially people who are considering buying, but they're like the waiters, or whatever it is. And I try to explain to them, like, look, the example I use is BlackRock. BlackRock has a multi-billion-dollar fund that they just put together. And this is one investment VC in the country, right? I mean, there's the large banks are doing the same thing. The goal for them is to buy homes that are middle class, right? Homes that people can afford to rent, but then they'll never be able to buy. And you're seeing this in Sacramento already, where all new construction is almost exclusively five to $700,000, well above the ability for any middle class person here in Sacramento to be able to afford. And
Right.
so it's really interesting thinking about the wealth gap and things like that. And what interests me is the most, and as much as I don't want like the podcast to be about race and gender and things like that, I'd love it to be like mostly neutral. I do think that there's such a unique component about race in this market, and because I'm on the lending side and I have to be really well versed on the lending laws as it pertains to protected classes.
Hmm.
I think that the Black community is extremely interesting, right? When we're talking about this wealth gap and what we're talking, I really want to get kind of a group of people who are in this industry, as well as kind of maybe in the finance industry as well, and kind of talk about that, because one of the largest growing marketing sectors that I'm seeing is Black owned community, right? The Black
Yep.
owned businesses.
Yep.
They're doing an extremely good job of getting their message out in the community. I think that there's a lot of rallying behind it. And so I'm interested to see that, although this gap is going to change, and we know historically the Black community hasn't been considered like part of the upper class. If we are going to see that transition as a whole into the upper class because of this huge rallying behind it and the huge support system that's happening. And so, I'm not Black myself. I'm, Hispanic, Samoan American, but I would love to have some, maybe just a group of people of color to kind of talk about that sort of thing, because it's interesting. And the only people that can really talk about it are the people that are living it. That's what I believe. So,
Absolutely. I think you'll find I want to say it's even BNR, it's like Black Network Realtors. There's a California branch it's literally like an organization of Black realtors. And
mm,
I would hope that you would get into that. The community I'm in is predominantly white. I think we're even lower than the American average. We maybe have 1% of Black Americans out here. Although I've had multiple clients that I've brought out from the Bay Area of diverse influence into here. So I feel like I'm kind of changing the face of Lake County a little
mm,
bit myself, and helping people to see that there can be a broader horizon out in some of these smaller counties that I think
mhm,
voted purple through the voting cycle. So we've got a lot of good hippie kind of things going on, lots of down home roots farms, and then we've got a lot of conservative hanging on to the oldies. This area was actually really popular in the 50s, kind of had its golden age. It was supposed to be like a mini Tahoe. So
mhm.
there's quite a mix of like brand new development in the 50s that all got subdivided up. Now there's mobile homes between nice houses. And so it's kind of a mix of high end to what you're watching with the middle class having to sell off in smaller and
Mhm.
smaller portions. Um, yeah, it's interesting to come through. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of networks for Black realtors and investors that I would bid you to look into.
Yeah, I know here in Sacramento, I want to say that there's a Black, I forget the exact name, because there's a Hispanic one. I think they're the Hispanic Realtor Association, if I remember correctly. Then there's an Asian one, and I
Mhm.
believe it's the Asian Association of Realtors. And so I think that there's a Black Association of Realtors out here as well. And I don't know in what relation they have to the Sacramento Association of Realtors or the
Right.
California Association of Realtors.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure how
I
that
think it's
works.
more of a social association, right?
Hmm.
Then
Yeah, and mostly because I only do real estate in the capacity of like personally, friends and family, and then I have my realtor partners, right? I do loans now.
right.
I'm all in on the loan side. And so it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, well, where's my time best spent learning more about the mortgage industry or going
Yeah.
to all of these meetings, which I would really enjoy and love to be at. But because I'm not heavy on the real estate side anymore. But I think for the sake of the podcast, it would be beneficial to connect with some of those communities. And have them. I've been having quite a bit. The last podcast I just had on, she's self-proclaimed herself a community advocate realtor.
Hmm.
And I've had a couple people who that's really their focus is on working with marginalized communities and how to get them into on the real estate ladder. And I think that's such an interesting approach to real estate to be able to be an advocate and things like that. Um, and then also, being kind of like I'm half and half. I worked in nonprofit for about a
Hmm.
decade, and so I'm very much kind of that's where my heart leans. But also, being in real estate and in our industry, you can make wealth pretty quickly. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of like have to go back and forth. It almost feels like you're constantly at, a road, and you're like, well, which way should I go today? Because you
Right.
can you can always make that decision,
Passion or
right?
profit. Passion or profit.
Yep, exactly. And so and I was just talking to my friend about this. She works in nonprofit, and we were talking about that article, and I was telling her, I was like, "Well, how does your decision feel to like do you want to stay in nonprofit because it's the idea behind nonprofit, if you've never worked for nonprofit, and this has been my experience and the people I've known who have also worked in nonprofits that I haven't worked in, is you work for half the money and you do four times the work.
Yep.
That's kind of the idea of nonprofit. And it's the idea that, you're there for a service, right?
Yep.
And so with that kind of in mind, where do you kind of lead yourself? And unless you work for mega nonprofits, the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, like national nonprofits, the likelihood of you making like a lot of money is pretty low. And so it's an interesting decision. Like people who stay in nonprofit their entire lives are pretty amazing people to
Yes.
have made that decision and stay there, right?
Absolutely. It's definitely a financial sacrifice that everybody understands when they go into it. And you're actually touching onto a side project. Me and another broker are kind of slowly building a brokerage that will work like a BlackRock
Mm,
and purchase houses to rent out, but at affordable rates in the
mm,
mind that we're not trying to aim for profit. And so we're kind of gathering a group of realtors who are like-minded and would like to do that service as
mm,
even if it's part-time, and we would sell the houses for individuals that have to or purchase them into our portfolio and manage them as low income rentals, possibly even getting government grants to do so, and just kind of keeping that as a way, because the rental market's insane. People are paying outrageous amounts because they can't buy.
mm,
People are sitting in terrible conditions because they can't pay higher rents. And so that's definitely a need. And yet we all understand that it is not going to be profitable personally. It's
mhm,
definitely, it's a soul pursuit. It's a spiritual profitable thing that we just need to do because we are in our community, and my kids are going to grow up in this community and I want it to do well. So my sacrifice of profit into a better community where people can afford their housing and live with a little bit extra stretch to enjoy their family life, definitely benefits me and benefits my future with my kids. So I see that as a well-versed investment, um, and still hope to make some great sales out here, because we have great vacation homes. So there's no doubt I can
mhm.
throw in some bigger sales and kind of keep things floating and get myself a house or a ranch. So I
Right.
have personal goals, but I've never considered. I'd always said if I was a billionaire, I'd be a billionaire for a day because I would buy everyone I know a home. I would make sure every person I could possibly run into would have everything they need, and boom, I'd be broke.
That's beautiful. I like that. Yeah, it's that kind of back and forth. It's really a tough decision to make, and especially like I grew up in foster care. So for me, it's particularly one of those things where it's like I grew up, there are people who grow up a little poorer than I did. Well, it could be way poor, but I grew
Right.
up as pretty much as low as you can get. Going out of there and being essentially on my own. And so I'm going to go back and forth with, wanting to help and then wanting to be very rich. And I'm
Hmm.
hoping that I can find a way to just get very rich in like a year. And then
Hmm.
I can spend the rest of my life, just helping. Um, but as of right now, I've found that balance that makes sense for me with doing things like this, right? I mean, we have a
Yep.
sponsor for the show and it's mostly to help out the people that are on it, but this is really about helping out our community, highlighting people that are doing things well in the community, and kind of trying to bring to light realtors that aren't scumbags, really, because realtors have such a bad rap. I mean, a lot of
Oh yeah.
realtors are considered like the same as car salesmen.
Yes.
And I'm sure car salesmen hate to hear that as well, because I'm sure there's a bunch of good ones out there.
Yep.
But it is kind of where it is. But I've had a couple people on. One of them, Community Rose, is her tag, and she it has done a very similar thing here in Sacramento. I want to say they put together essentially a portfolio of 4 properties that are in one of the most expensive areas in Sacramento that is affordable housing. And
Hmm.
that's kind of her mission. I've had another woman, Maria, who her big thing is her church. And so she essentially works to try to raise money for her ability to continue to do service, not only locally, but internationally through her church. And so I find that maybe I gravitate towards people like that, or they gravitate towards me. But for some reason, that's been what's been on the podcast. I haven't yet had a person who's like, I'm all about the money. That's why I'm here. I'd love to
Hmm.
have somebody on like that, because, it's not that I don't understand it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that I don't understand it at all, but I just haven't been able to make. And the other thing I found as well is that, um, people who are like more giving with their time tend to be like be more likely to want to do a podcast. Where other people who are like, no, I'm not going to make any money off that. They're like, I don't really
Right.
want to do a podcast, right?
Right.
So that's
Mhm.
kind of right. So you have these projects, and they're coming together. Do you guys kind of have a projection date on when you hope to have these done?
Um, well, are we talking about resort projects?
Yeah, resort
Yeah.
projects.
I mean, we want to hope to have our restaurant open in a couple of weeks. This is very much one of those 1950s resorts that we're revitalizing.
Mm,
Where it comes into the nonprofit project, we project about a year or two out. We're looking for investors and grant writers and such like that. So that's definitely a slow moving project, but we're
mm,
all obviously collecting, community members and contacts and networking. So that's kind of a seed in the ground at the moment. But as the resort that I've got going on here, we're painting things, we're getting in construction. Where I think this builds the community, we're taking something old, we're revitalizing it. The nice thing for the local community is that it will be able to be fractionally invested back, so they can
mm,
buy in for $5,000, $10,000 little parcels and get stipends every quarter and such like that. So that I think is different, to help get the local communities, because we have families here that have been here for 5, 6 generations, and they were going to rally to try to buy the location for the $1 million it was up for listing, but they wouldn't have had the money to renovate. They wouldn't have had,
mm,
so we had kind of a pushback from our community, thinking that was outside investors. And actually the CEO of the company that did buy in, came here for his summers through childhood, graduated from Middletown High School. So when
mm,
people kind of started to realize that this was more of a passion project, because it's not the most profitable of his project. He does huge condos, he does huge mansions, puts out brand new tennis. So this is kind of more of the foresty, vacation style for
mm.
their company, and definitely not an easy one. We're coming out of a lot of owners that did the least, and we're trying to do the most. And I think just revitalizing projects like that is, definitely helps to boost people's property values, get people interested in buying and selling out here. So that's the best I can do right there. Where it comes to, getting to the nitty gritty, yeah, it'd be nice to make a lot of money and then help a lot of people
Yeah,
afterwards.
exactly.
But your soul longs to make sure that you're doing that, and it's been able to bring me some of the best clients, so
Mm.
that even, whatever the situation is, be it dire or, they just had a windfall and they're ready to take care of themselves, that's probably been the best part, is meeting new people and moving them out here, getting them out to Tennessee because they wanted to see mom and had to sell their house. Just lots of lovely stories. So I
Mm.
may never be rich, but I'm rich in spirit, I'm rich in experience. And yeah, I could go tomorrow and still be super glad about my experience on the planet.
That's awesome. So we are coming towards the end of the podcast. I did want to give you an opportunity to throw out any of your social medias that you'd like people to follow. I don't know if you have a website or anything like that, but this is time for it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I even really, I think you introduced me. My name's Nora Moore. You can find me on Instagram as Nora Moore, the realtor. Kind of an almost play on rhyme there. You can find the resort that I'm opening up on Loch Lomond Resort and RVPark.com. If you look anything about Loch Lomond or Lake County, out here, we definitely have just a wealth of vacation locations. And if you're looking for some of the least expensive housing options or investment options, this is the county. It's on paperwork. This is it has the lowest income, but I think just in the last 2 years, we've been jumping with our Bay Area imports. So find me. I love to show people around. It is a beautiful county, from rolling hills of oak and walnut trees to a lake to forest mountains. I feel so just fortunate to have been out here, and we haven't had too bad of fires the last couple years, so that's a bonus.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that. Well, we appreciate it. And always, guys, her contact information and social medias, things like that will be in the bio. So if you're looking for a vacation home or a home or an investment property, or you're interested in the projects that she's working on, all that information will be available. And as always, this is the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.